Hi folks, welcome to Amplify Women on Research. I'm very excited today to have Dr. Dori Rosenberg with us. Dr. Rosenberg is an associate investigator at Kaiser Permanente, Washington Health Research Institute, as well as an affiliate associate professor at the University of Washington, Department of Health Services. Thanks for being here today, Dr. Rosenberg.
Thanks for having me.
So we'll get started. Tell us a little bit about how things started off for you and what some of your most cited work is in this field.
So I actually just looked on Google Scholar to see. I had no idea what was my most cited work. And interestingly, the work I did in graduate school is much more popular than the work that I'm doing now. So in graduate school, I had the really fortunate opportunity of doing some work with Fiona Bull at the University of Loughborough, where we examined the reliability and validity of the sitting items in the International Physical Activity Questionnaire. And it was one of the first papers, I think, on kind of validating a sedentary behavior measure that could be used, population-wide in epidemiologic studies. We really recognized that, to build the field of sedentary behavior research, we needed to have explicit measures of sedentary behaviors. So that was really fun work to do, and I followed it up with another investigation of a self-reported measure called the Sedentary Behavior Questionnaire, which we used in a large series of studies based out of UCSD with Dr. Kevin Patrick and Jim Salas and Karen Kalfas, where they had developed this sedentary behavior questionnaire scale that's about 9 or 10 items, I believe, and asks about domains of sedentary behaviors, which was also something really important for the field to not only be measuring total sitting time, but time spent in behaviors like watching television, riding in a car, using computers. And I still get a lot of emails from people asking about that sedentary behavior questionnaire, which is really fun for me and kind of reminds me of my roots in the field of sedentary behavior research.
That's awesome. It's always fun when it's something you took on in grad school that becomes some of your most cited work, right? Because
Right.
Yeah, it's unexpected, but it's also very nice. It's exciting, right? As a grad
Yeah, totally.
That. Is there some work that you've done that you thought, this is going to be it? Like, this is going to be amazing. It's going to be well cited, but it didn't quite get the traction you hoped for?
A lot of my work, I particularly have been struck by how intervention studies don't seem to really get a lot of attention. It seems like epidemiologic work gets more attention, and now that I'm doing some of both, my roots are in intervention research. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, so I love behavior change and intervention work. And it's been surprising that, people don't care about the details of how we developed a trial to reduce sitting time. So that's been interesting, that distinction has been really interesting. And, in intervention work, there's so much work that goes into deploying those interventions. So it's just struck me that we do all this work and then it doesn't seem like that many people actually read the studies, but I'm still going to keep doing it because that's what I love.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because the metrics we have in research might not necessarily reflect the impact of those interventions, right? It's citations, they're harder to get for very specialized interventions, right? So hopefully the work is impactful, even if it's not as well cited, right?
Exactly. It does feel really impactful. And, yeah.
So speaking of impactful, what's some work that you're doing currently that you think is going to have a significant impact?
So here's where I kind of want to bring up my intervention research, where we actually just had a paper posted online yesterday, so the timing for this is really good, which is the results of a pilot randomized control trial of sitting reduction in older adults. So it's one of the first randomized controlled trials. We followed people for 12 weeks, which is also one of the longer studies that's out there. And we found that, it was efficacious to reduce sitting time. We reduced it by about an hour per day. And we had some results. We impacted some psychosocial outcomes like self-efficacy and sedentary behavior habit strength, but no impact on the health outcomes that we measured. So that was a bummer, but we also weren't powered to look at health outcomes. So we had some trends in the right direction, but nothing significant. And that is now out at the Journal of Aging and Physical Activity, and I can provide you with the link to that. So that represents many years of work. So it took a long time to find a home for that paper. So this again shows how difficult it is to get interventions published. It was an RCT with 60 people. And, we could not get it published. It took a year. So we've been trying to publish it for a year. And it's just really frustrating. So
frustrating.
So I'm glad that it's finally out. And I'm really grateful to the Journal of Aging and Physical Activity, which I do think is a good home for a lot of the work I do.
Yeah, I find it very frustrating. We just had that experience as well, where we had a randomized study that keeps getting rejected, and you think, my goodness, like, we're doing what we're supposed to do. We're following like the best practices, best scientific sort of methodologies, and you still can't get published. So it is interesting. Yeah. I think I do have a interview booked with someone who's on the editorial board of a journal to see if we can get some more insight on that, because it is an interesting issue that I've heard other people say as well. So
yeah, and I think part of the problem is the reviewers. They're very tough on RCTs and often say, well, why didn't you do it this way? And it's like, well, a lot of thought went into this intervention and we can't change it after the fact. So there's nothing I can say to you that will convince you that we shouldn't have done it your way. Everybody designs their trials differently and depending on, all of their pilot research. So I think, I've just been struck by some of the reviews we got were pretty scathing, and I'm not sure why. So,
well, and I think you shouldn't almost be allowed to review intervention research if you've never done it, because you might not have some of those same questions, right?
Yes.
Well, this has been awesome. I'd like to end with a little bit of a message maybe for other early career researchers out there who might be struggling or who need some encouragement from successful women in research like yourself.
Yeah, I guess my two pieces of advice are, one, don't be a perfectionist. Nothing that we do ever gets to the point of being perfect, really, if you think about it. There's no way to make it perfect. So if it saves you 20 drafts, to just stop at the second draft and know that you will get input from your team who's working with you, and you don't have to do it all. That has made me a lot more efficient and a lot more able to just, get things done. I also try to use little bits of time that I have in my day to start working on paper. So even if I have only a half hour, I'll write a paragraph for a paper. So using those little bits of time that we often have in our day, often people don't take advantage of that time and think, oh, I need 4 hours if I'm going to work on a paper. And I would just say, just do little bits wherever you can, and don't be afraid to kind of do it over time. And then the biggest piece of advice, we've talked about this a lot at my institute this week actually, is just not to feel the pressure of having high performing year after high performing year after high performing year. All of us have years that are tough where we don't get as much done. And we can still make it. I made it to the associate level, even though I ended up taking a year away from work to deal with some health issues. And a lot of my female colleagues have had to take a year off of work to have children. And that's really important. You have to have other things in your life other than work. And if it delays tenure by a year or, you know, whatever, I still think it's worth it if you want to be on the slow path. And I know a lot of women who have taken, you know, their time to get tenure and to get to the next level, and it's totally fine. My last piece of advice is just to seek out female mentors who role model what kind of career you want to have. So often we have role models who we don't necessarily, you know, they're bigwigs, so to speak, you know, and we think, oh, we have to do everything how they do. And I've had mentors like that. But it's been really important for me to find people that are kind of like me, and that, you know, take a slightly slower path, and that treat people the way that I want to treat people, and that have a little bit of balance between home and work life in their to support well-being. So that has been really helpful for me as well.
It's fantastic advice. I really like that. The mentorship one to me has been key as well. And I think, you know, even having multiple mentors is important, right? Like, because every person will model something different that you can sort of use, right? So I think that's fantastic advice. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me today. And I'm very excited to read the papers you talked about. And I hope we can make some changes for intervention research and make it easier to get that work published in the future. Thanks again.
Thank you.